It was a stormy night. The streets were drenched in rain, the air carried a haunting chill, and silence ruled the city, except for one sound. A faint, broken cry. A sound that could pierce even the coldest heart. There, lying helplessly in the shadows of an abandoned alley, was a German shepherd. Not just any dog. This was a K9, once a proud police dog, a guardian, a hero. Now, his once strong body was trembling, his chest rising and falling with painful effort. Blood seeped from wounds that told the story of sacrifice. His uniform vest, torn and soaked, clung to his body like a reminder of who he was and what he had endured. Every breath was a struggle, every cry weaker than the last. Yet still, he cried. Not for himself, but as if calling out, desperately hoping that someone, anyone, might hear. The rain washed over his face, mixing with tears in his weary eyes. His ears twitched at every sound, searching for footsteps, for hope, for life. This dog was no ordinary soldier. For years, he had walked beside his handler, through danger, through fire, through chaos. He had sniffed out threats, saved lives, and charged into places no human dared to go. He had been fearless, loyal, unbreakable, and yet now, he was alone. A hero abandoned by the world he had served. But destiny had not finished writing his story. That night, as the storm raged on, a man walked hurriedly down the street, his umbrella barely shielding him from the rain. He was tired, lost in his own thoughts, but something made him stop. A sound, that faint cry, that voice that spoke of pain, of desperation. He froze. His heart pounded. Something inside urged him to follow the sound. He turned his head, and his eyes locked onto the shadow in the corner of the alley. At first, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. A police K9, collapsed, bleeding, crying out softly. The sight struck him like lightning. He had read stories about dogs like this, fearless protectors who saved lives, who stood between danger and safety, but he had never thought he would see one like this, broken and on the edge of death. The man's hands trembled as he stepped closer. The dog's eyes lifted weakly, and in that instant, something powerful passed between them. A silent plea, a message stronger than words. Please, don't leave me. The man fell to his knees beside him. He whispered softly, as if speaking to an old friend, "Hold on, boy. I'm here now. I won't let you die like this." The dog's tail moved ever so slightly. A flicker of hope, but time was slipping away. The man knew if he didn't act now, this hero would be gone forever. With rain soaking his clothes, he lifted the heavy body of the German shepherd into his arms. He could feel the dog's heartbeat, faint, irregular, fighting to stay alive. Each beat was like a drum counting down to the end. He ran, through the rain, through the empty streets, his arms tightening around the dog with every step. He shouted for help, but the night swallowed his voice. His only thought was to keep moving, to find someone, somewhere, who could save this broken soldier. And then, out of the darkness, a light appeared. A small veterinary clinic at the edge of the street, its sign glowing dimly. Hope. Without hesitation, the man burst through the door. The veterinarian on duty gasped at the sight. "My God, what happened to him?" she cried, rushing forward. "He's AK-9, the man panted. "He's dying, please, do something." The staff sprang into action. They cleared a table, brought out instruments, and prepared to fight for the dog's life. The man placed him gently on the table, his hand lingering on the dog's paw as if refusing to let go. The German shepherd's eyes opened briefly. Weak, glassy, but still filled with that same unwavering loyalty. He looked at the man, the stranger who had chosen to stop, who had chosen to care. And for a moment, it was as if the dog was saying, thank you for not letting me die alone." The veterinarian worked quickly, checking his wounds, monitoring his pulse. "He's lost a lot of blood. This is going to be tough," she muttered, her face grim. The man swallowed hard, his voice breaking. "Do whatever it takes. He's a hero. He deserves to live." And so began the battle for his life. Machines beeped, hands moved rapidly, voices filled the room with urgency. Every second mattered. The dog's breaths grew shallower, his body weaker. But somewhere deep inside, the soul of a warrior refused to let go. Memories flashed across his fading mind, his handler's smile, the sound of commands he had obeyed, the lives he had saved, the trust he had earned. He remembered chasing down criminals, standing guard, being praised as the bravest of them all. And now, in this fragile moment, he was fighting one last time, not for duty, not for honor, but for the chance to feel kindness again. The man never left his side. His hand remained on the dog's paw, whispering words of comfort, promising that he wasn't alone. Rain still poured outside, thunder still roared, but inside that small clinic, a battle was being fought with love, courage, and hope. Hours seemed like days. The veterinarian and her team did everything: stitches, fluids, medicine, oxygen. The dog's heart flickered between life and death, like a candle struggling against the wind. And then, something shifted. A stronger heartbeat, a steadier breath, a sign that the warrior inside was not ready to surrender. The man felt tears fill his eyes as he whispered again, "That's it, boy. Fight. Fight like you always have. You're not done yet." But little did they know, what would happen next would leave everyone speechless. The night stretched endlessly. Inside the small veterinary clinic, time seemed to move slower than ever. The storm outside roared, but inside, the only sound that mattered was the faint beep of the monitor. Each beep carried a weight, each one a reminder that this brave soldier's life still hung by a fragile thread. The man who had carried the dog here refused to leave his side. His clothes were soaked, his body shivered from the cold, but his hand never left the paw of the German shepherd. He felt every twitch, every tremor, as if his own heart was connected to the dog's. The veterinarian worked tirelessly. Her gloves were stained, her eyes focused, her voice firm as she instructed her assistants. "We can't lose him. Keep the fluids going. Increase oxygen flow." The dog's chest rose and fell, shallow but steady. His eyes flickered open for a moment, and in that split second, a memory surged through his fading mind. He was back in the field, running through tall grass, his handler by his side. He remembered the sound of his handler's whistle, the commanding voice he had always obeyed. He remembered chasing down danger, alerting his team, saving lives. The echo of applause, the pat on the head, the medal tied around his neck, all of it was etched in his soul. He had been proud, not because of rewards, but because he had a purpose. A mission. But now, his handler was gone. Taken by fate in an operation that had gone wrong. The canine had survived that night, but not without scars. Scars that weren't just on his body, but in his heart. Since then, he had wandered, lost, abandoned by the system that once praised him. And yet tonight, in his darkest hour, a stranger had answered his cry. The man leaned closer, whispering softly as if his words could keep the dog alive. "Don't you quit on me. You've fought for so many, now fight for yourself. Fight for me." The monitor suddenly beeped irregularly. The veterinarian's eyes widened. "We're losing him. Quick. Adrenaline, now." The team moved with urgency. A syringe pierced the dog's skin. Seconds felt like hours. The man's grip tightened around the paw. His lips trembled as he prayed silently. And then, a sound. Beep, beep, stronger, louder. The monitor's rhythm steadied. The line of life that had almost faded returned with force. The room exhaled in relief. The veterinarian looked up, sweat on her forehead, and whispered, "He's not giving up. He wants to live." Tears filled the man's eyes. He whispered again, his voice breaking, "That's my boy, you're a fighter." But the battle wasn't over. Hours passed. The storm outside finally began to quiet, but inside, the silence was still heavy. The man sat on a chair beside the dog, his hand still resting on him. Exhaustion weighed on his body, but his heart wouldn't allow him to sleep. He couldn't take his eyes off the dog who had already stolen his soul. At dawn, the first rays of sunlight slipped through the clinic window, casting a soft glow over the room. The German shepherd stirred faintly, his ears twitching. His eyes opened just a little, weak, but alive. He looked around the unfamiliar room, then at the man, and in that look, there was something unforgettable. Gratitude, trust, an unspoken bond. The veterinarian smiled faintly. "He's stable for now. It's a miracle. If you hadn't brought him here when you did," she shook her head, "he wouldn't have made it." The man stroked the dog's head gently. "Then it wasn't me, it was him. He called for help, and I just listened." For the first time in a long while, the German shepherd closed his eyes not in pain, but in rest. He drifted into sleep, his body finally safe, his heart finally at peace, if only for a moment. But fate had more in store. As days passed, the man returned every day to the clinic. He brought food, blankets, and above all, presents. The dog, though weak, began to heal. His wounds closed slowly, his strength grew little by little. Every time the man entered the room, the dog's ears perked up. His tail moved slightly, his eyes lit with recognition. The staff noticed it too. "He responds to you," one of the nurses said with a smile. It's like you're his handler now. The man chuckled softly. I'm no handler, I just couldn't leave him there to die. But inside, he knew it was more than that. Something deeper had awakened in him that night. He had always believed heroes wore uniforms, carried weapons, or stood tall before crowds. But now he knew, heroes could also walk on four legs, silently guarding lives without asking for anything in return. One evening, as the man sat beside the recovering dog, the veterinarian approached him quietly. You should know, this canine's past isn't ordinary. He was one of the best. His file says he saved dozens of lives in his years of service. But after his handler died, the department retired him. No one claimed him. He just disappeared. The man's chest tightened. So he really was abandoned. The veterinarian nodded. Until you found him. The man looked at the dog, sleeping peacefully. No, he found me, and he meant it. Because the truth was, that night, it wasn't just the dog who cried for help. Deep down, the man had been lost too, wandering through his own storm of life, searching for meaning. And in the broken body of a dying German shepherd, he had found it. But destiny is never so simple. As the dog's health improved, whispers began to spread. Someone from the old K9 unit had heard about him. And soon, a decision would need to be made, one that would change everything again. Because this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning. The days turned into weeks. The German shepherd grew stronger, his wounds healing, his spirit slowly returning. His eyes, once dull with pain, now held a spark again, the same spark that had once led him into danger without fear. Every day, the man came. He spoke to him, fed him, and simply sat beside him. A bond was forming that no words could describe. The dog, though scarred by his past, began to trust again. His tail wagged whenever the man entered the room. His ears perked up when he heard his footsteps. He no longer cried, not from pain, but from longing when the man had to leave. One morning, the veterinarian approached with a folder in her hands. She looked serious. I thought you should know, she said quietly. The department has been notified. They want to take him back. The man froze. His heart sank. Take him back? After everything? After they left him to die? The veterinarian sighed. Technically, he's still government property. He was a K9 officer. They're considering putting him back into the unit, or retiring him permanently. The man looked at the dog, who lay beside him, eyes filled with quiet loyalty. The thought of losing him was unbearable. He's not just a tool. He's not just a name on a file. He's family now, but the decision wasn't his to make. 2 weeks later, men from the department arrived. They wore official uniforms, their expressions stiff. One of them stepped forward. This dog, his name is Rex. He was one of the finest K9s we ever had. We didn't know he was still alive until recently. We're here to take him. The man's chest tightened. He knelt beside Rex, whispering into his ear. They may call you Rex, but to me, you're more than that. You're my boy, and I won't let them take you away. As if understanding, Rex pressed his head against the man's chest, his body trembling. He didn't want to leave either. The officers hesitated. One of them, older, with graying hair, softened his tone. Sir, you have to understand. This dog saved countless lives. He deserves honor. He deserves recognition. The man's eyes burned with emotion. Recognition? You left him to die in an alley. You forgot him. I didn't. He cried for help, and I answered. Not you. Me. Now tell me, who truly deserves him? Silence filled the room. The weight of his words struck them. The man stood beside him, his hand resting on Rex's back. Cameras flashed, people clapped, but Rex's eyes never left the one person who had saved him. And then, something unbelievable happened. During the ceremony, an old woman approached. Her hands trembled, her eyes glistened with tears. She carried a small photo in her wrinkled fingers. She looked at the man, then at Rex, and whispered, "That dog, he belonged to my son. He was his handler. My son, he never came home." The man's breath caught. He looked at the photo. It was Rex's original handler, the man he had lost in the operation years ago. The resemblance was undeniable. The woman's voice cracked as she stroked Rex's head. For years, I prayed someone would find him, that he wouldn't die alone. And here you are, a stranger who gave him what we could not. Tears streamed down the man's face. He realized now, this was no coincidence. That night in the rain, Rex had not just cried for help. He had cried out for someone who would carry on the bond he lost. Somehow, fate had led him to the one person who could fill that void. Rex pressed against the man's leg, his eyes closing in peace. He had found not only a savior but a new family. And as the sun set that evening, the crowd watched in silence as Rex, once broken and forgotten, stood tall again. A hero not just in name, but in spirit. A dog who had cried for help, and found a miracle. Because sometimes, the most unbelievable thing is not survival, not recognition, not honor, but love. Finally, the older officer sighed. Perhaps you're right. Perhaps his destiny has already chosen you. He pulled out a paper and handed it over. Sign this. He's yours now. The man's hands shook as he signed, tears blurring his vision. When it was done, he looked down at Rex and whispered, "You're home now. Forever." But the story didn't end there. Months later, news spread across the city about the incredible survival of Rex, the forgotten K9. A ceremony was held in his honor. For the first time since his handler's death, Rex stood proudly again, wearing a fresh vest, not as a tool of the state, but as a symbol of loyalty, courage, and the bond between man and dog.